Tyrannosaurus rex, tyrant king of the primordial forests. The apex by which all other predators are measured. A horrible, gaping maw with foot-long daggers for teeth. A voracious appetite for the flesh of lesser beings. And feathers? While it's still up for debate whether T-Rex specifically had feathers, we've known for quite some time that birds evolved from dinosaurs. With that in mind, we know that feathers had to show up somewhere. So, where did they come from? The precursors of bird feathers were straight, dense, filament-like structures, which were mostly made of keratin, the same stuff your hair and fingernails are made of. Today, the typical feather consists of a central shaft called a rachis, with serial-paired barbs forming a flat, curved surface, which is called a vein. Each barb branches into barbules, which link to one another by hooks. This interconnected structure stiffens the vein. So, we understand how feathers evolved, but how do we know that dinosaurs had them? Well, in the 1990s, around the same time as a certain classic film showed us scaly, non-feathered dinosaurs, the first dinosaur fossils with feather-like structures were discovered. Since then, further discoveries have convinced some scientists that all dinosaurs had a feathery covering on some part of their body. Kind of like how all mammals have hair, but only some are really hairy. While it seems that dinosaurs were growing feathers as early as 180 million years ago, they probably weren't the first creatures to have them. Pterosaurs, another group of archosaurs, or ruling reptiles, like the dinosaurs, may have developed feathers earlier than their dino cousins did. Paleontology is still looking for clues, but feathers likely developed about 250 million years ago. By the time dinosaurs jumped on the feather bandwagon, they were so last eon. Of course, just because dinosaurs have feathers doesn't make them any less fearsome. But instead of picturing a giant lizard, you might want to start thinking of something with a bit more plumage.
As a paleontologist whose specialty is the early evolution of birds, Archaeopteryx is like the Holy Grail. Never in my wildest dreams would I imagine I would be able to study one of the best specimens of this iconic species.
Because Archaeopteryx is such a valuable fossil, there's a lot of different analyses that have never been done. Because the specimen is just so spectacularly well preserved, we've learned a ton of just fundamental morphological information, meaning just basic information about what the skeleton looked like. And that's something I'm really surprised by, because Archaeopteryx is one of the most heavily studied fossils of all time. There's 12 specimens, and yes, it's very rare, but it's actually the most common dinosaur from the Solnhofen limestones. I'm really shocked that we've learned just tons of new information about what the skull looked like. We've shown that the tail was longer than we previously thought. We also have more soft tissues with our specimen than any other Archaeopteryx, and these soft tissues are showing us how the wings looked. Also, it has this tract of feathers called tertials that have never been seen before and are bigger than any living bird, so we're trying to unravel what that means in terms of the biology of Archaeopteryx. I'm hoping that we're going to use this fossil to address questions that have been going on for over 150 years, like how many species are represented by the specimens? Could it fly? How did it fly? For all the bird nerds out there, we're also going to go into all these details about what Archaeopteryx ecology was, to understand how its ecology may have set the stage for the entire subsequent evolution of birds in the Cretaceous up to today. We're going to do chemical spectral analyses to understand how the soft tissues and the bones are preserved. And the list goes on. there's this small dinosaur named Anchiornis that was originally thought to be a troodontid dinosaur. Birds are most closely related to troodontid dinosaurs. And then as more of these Anchiornis-like dinosaurs were found, they were then resolved as forming their own little group, and that group is sister taxon to Archaeopteryx and all other birds. So you could then say, well, birds are Archaeopteryx plus Anchiornis, or you could just remove them and just consider Archaeopteryx to be birds. And I strongly think that the latter is more likely, because what really makes Archaeopteryx a bird dinosaur is the appearance of flight in this particular lineage of dinosaur. And if you look at the wings of Anchiornis, the proto-wings, they're definitely not capable of flight. It's not a flying animal, without a doubt. And Archaeopteryx shows all the signs that it was able to fly. So I would say that nobody has made a convincing argument for these slightly older, probably troodontid dinosaurs actually being avian troodontid dinosaurs.
Fossil fuels are one of the largest energy resources in the world. They power automobiles, our power grid, and make our houses cooler in the summer and hotter in the winter. And while it's tragic that the dinosaurs had to die to give us this source of power, Wait, what?
Fossil fuels aren't made from fossils.
What do you mean fossil fuels aren't made of fossils? When we say fossil fuels, we're actually talking about a wide variety of products. Coal, petroleum, oil, natural gas, oil shales, bitumens, tar sands, and heavy oils. Aside from coming out of the ground, all fossil fuels have a couple things in common. They all contain carbon, and they were all formed over a long period of time from the remains of organic matter. But not just any organic matter. In fact, fossil fuels are the remains of organics produced by photosynthesis, algae, bacteria, and plants. Some of which date back to before the Devonian period, between 419 and 358 million years ago. During the millions of years that followed, these organisms were buried deeper and deeper underground. Under this immense pressure and heat, they gradually decomposed into hydrocarbon-based molecules that retained the energy they had initially stored during photosynthesis. In other words, all these algae and bacteria were used by nature's pressure cooker to make a whole bunch of flammable rocks, goo, and gas. But, despite the name, fossil fuels aren't fossils. Typically, what we call fossils are preserved skeletons of animals. The material that makes up bone resists decomposition. So, while the organic tissues surrounding the bones are completely broken down, they are replaced by inorganic minerals in a process called petrifaction. These hardened, fire-resistant, and carbon-free materials are excellent museum displays, but they don't really make for good energy sources. Of course, while fossil fuels do make good fuel, it turns out that burning a lot of decomposed plant matter generates a whole host of byproducts that contribute to things like groundwater contamination, acid rain, and climate change. On top of that, fossil fuels are quickly becoming extinct themselves. They're a limited resource, so once we've used up the material that was stored in the earth, it's gone forever. The revelation that plants and other photosynthesizers are the precursors to fossil fuels has led to an explosion, not literally, of research into biofuels. However, this is still cutting-edge technology that isn't efficient or environmentally friendly enough to use on an industrial scale yet. Whether these new biofuels are the future, or solar and wind will continue to be the major players of renewable energy, remains to be seen. But when it comes to the processes that still rely on fossil fuels, we'll have to continue using ancient refined algae goo. Rest in peace, dinosaurs. Rest in peace.